You're depressed because you cannot see the person that, or the children or child, the person that means the most to you in the world. So it's not, and you go to court, back to court 10, 20, 30 times and nothing's done. You can see why some parents are forced to that point where they do take their own lives, because they're exhausting every option available to them.
Simon Cobb helps parents who are alienated from their kids. He says it negatively impacts children, parents and society. Simon talks about problems with the Child Maintenance Service, family courts and non-enforcement of court orders.
Enforcement orders constantly being broken and there's no punishment. So if you're a parent that is wanting control or is bitter at the other parent, and you can be financially rewarded for stopping them seeing their child, and you know there's no consequences for you doing that, then if you're of that mind, then why would you not do that?
He says false allegations are commonplace and can have life-threatening consequences.
They are making false allegations to the court, they're making false allegations to the police, they're making false allegations to children's services, to CAFCAS. All of these have been found to be false several times in the court. You know, it's on record that the other parent has lied, and nothing's done. And the police will then go, no, this is a civil matter.
Welcome to British Thought Leaders. I'm Lee Hall. Today I'm sitting down with Simon Cobb, founder of People Against Parental Alienation. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You start by explaining to us what parental alienation is.
So parental alienation is where a parent and child relationship is severed, is destroyed through manipulation and a various number of behaviours that basically are intentional, such as gaslighting, coercive control, triangulation. All of these behaviours culminate and cause a child and parent to become alienated from one another.
Right, so we're talking the other parent is kind of causing it.
Yeah. It's generally a deliberate action. Sometimes it can start off maybe unintentional as a collateral damage from a fallout of a relationship, a breakdown of a relationship, but often it's very deliberate. The other parent knows exactly what they're doing. It may be for a desire of control, it may be for a desire for money, because obviously with child support and benefits, etc., if one parent is less involved, then they're then less entitled to any support from the government, and obviously the parent that's alienating is then able to claim through the CMS for child support, etc. So there's often incentives that drive the behaviour of parental alienation.
So how widespread is this? Is it more common in recent years, would you say?
Well, obviously I've got thousands and thousands of members and followers, so that would suggest that it's very common. I've seen it firsthand, not only in, I had difficulty when my son was young, I had difficulty seeing him, so I saw how it could happen. Luckily I was able to mitigate that quite early, but growing up from teenage years with my stepfather, I saw him be alienated from his children. So in various ways, like he maintained contact, but sometimes maintaining that contact actually makes it worse, because both parents are constantly butting heads. The children are put in the middle and often forced to choose sides. So I saw all of that. I saw the damage it did to him, and I saw the damage it did to his children. So in my life, it's been very common because I've known it from a young age. I then was party to it to some extent. But luckily was able to mitigate that, and then obviously starting Papa, I've get hundreds and hundreds of messages and emails a week. It's way too many to keep up. I get, thousands a month, emails, messages. I think it's just loads. So it's extremely common, unfortunately, extremely common.
What are some of the tactics that these alienators would use?
The tactics, when the contact is still established, we see making disparaging remarks about the other parent is very common. It can start off as subtle, and it often is subtle, like just saying your mum or dad is not very good at this or not very good at that, or they're always late, they're always this, they're always that. Just making generalised statements and critical statements to the child, which then puts that child in an awkward position where they then feel like they have to potentially side with one of the two parents. They can gaslight the children, make them believe things that have happened that have not happened. Obviously, children are or even adults can be manipulated. So obviously, the media does a great job of that. But children are very impressionable, so very easy to manipulate, unfortunately, because they're so impressionable. So it's not difficult for a parent to be able to kind of use a child as like a ventriloquist dummy. You know, it's very easy to manipulate a child to parrot your own feelings. If you tell it to them enough, they then start to believe it. Imprinting, so giving false memories. They'll then remember things back differently to how they perhaps happened, because they're confusing their own memories with what they've been told. There's many tactics that will be used to cause that disconnect between the child and the other parent.
I know you've got some quite touching examples on your website. Can you talk us through some, obviously without naming names, let us understand how this really impacts the parents?
I mean, a lot of the examples that I come across with what I do, because with PAPA, we try to find solutions for people's problems, and often people who are going through this are going through family court to try and regain that contact. So a lot of my experiences are actually through the family court process in terms of what I've seen, which involves so many even more tactics than just the psychological tactics there. I see a lot of I see the family court being used as a weapon. I see false allegations of abuse is very, very common. I see also, because all of these allegations then go through social services, through CAFCAS, so often the alienating parent will then just make up narratives, say that the child's behaving in a certain way, opposite to how they actually are behaving, will then accuse the other parent of neglect, or accuse the other parent of being the alienating parent, so accuse the other parent of manipulating their child and psychologically abusing their child. I see a lot of that, and because the court process is so slow, parents go months to years without getting anywhere close to seeing their children. And unfortunately with PAPA, we've seen many parents have taken their own lives as a result of it, which is why I did the death penalty campaign recently, which was on the BBC, where we set up demonstrations outside courts, memorial demonstrations, floral demonstrations of wreaths and flowers, etc., to show the consequences of a slow judicial process, a process that doesn't do well at identifying alienating behaviours, doesn't do well at identifying when a child is being manipulated or emotionally abused. So what we do at PAPA, we try to connect the dots, because parental alienation is the end result. When a child and a parent are alienated, that's the end result. That's that relationship severed, often destroyed. So we try to connect the dots on how that happens. So, and the consequences of that. So when that child-parent relationship is severed, unfortunately, after a frustrated family court process, we do see parents take their own lives as a result of it. And then, we try to connect the dots with our campaigns, like why these things are happening, what motivates parents to alienate. Is it because they're bitter, or is it because they're looking for financial support via CMS, etc.? So we try to connect the dots to understand what incentives are driving this behaviour, and how can we stop these incentives and stop the negative consequences for alienated parents, and instead bring serious consequences to the parents that are actually causing the abuse, inflicting the abuse.
So what are some of the biggest incentives to carry on with this parental alienation that you would see? What are the most common causes?
So I think initially when a relationship breaks down, I think it's a mixture of bitterness, of a relation, which is normal. Like a lot of relationships don't cut clean. Like a lot of them will have some animosity between two parties. I think that's normal. And then when you put a child in the middle of that, it becomes very complicated, because obviously both parents want to see their child, but these two people are not getting on very well. So I think sometimes it just starts from there, and then from there one of the parents or both, but often one, and one is always enabled more than the other because the way the system's set up, the system is set up so there's always one primary parent and one secondary parent, which makes no sense at all. There should only be you're both primary parents in the household, so whether that house, even if you're going to part ways and there's two households, you're still both the same. You're both as important as each other, whether you're in the same house or separate houses. So the primary, straight away, that's creates an adversarial scenario. So that's wrong. But I think, so then one of the parents in that bitterness feels empowered, will feel like they have control and they will want that control because they're not happy with the person that they've obviously ended their relationship with. So the child gives them a sense of control. And then it will stem from there. And obviously when the other parent is then fighting to see their child, which obviously you shouldn't have to fight to see your child, but that's the situation that is created, straight away there's that power dynamic, that control dynamic that causes even more friction. And then another incentive from there is if one of the parents is to stop that contact or restrict that contact, they are then entitled to certain benefits and child support, through the CMS. So there's a massive financial incentive. If I was to stop my son's mother seeing him, I can then claim money. So I'm financially rewarded for trying to sever that relationship
because
or try to
you're
restrict
kind of a
that.
solo parent.
Yeah,
Right.
if you, it's kind of like if you take on that solo parent role, you're financially rewarded, and there's no consequences because it will go to court, and even when a court order is made, nothing's, if a court order was made against me, I have to allow 50-50 equal parenting, which is what's normally right for a child. They need an equal relationship, or as best as possible, they need as much access to both parents as possible. If an order's made to me that's the order for the child, they need to be able to spend time with both parents as much as possible, and I break that order, there's very seldom any consequences for that, and then it can go back again and back again, constantly enforcement orders, constantly being broken, and there's no punishment. So if you're a parent that is wanting control or is bitter at the other parent, and you can be financially rewarded for stopping them seeing their child, and there's no consequences for you doing that, then if you're of that mind, then why would you not do that? It's too easy not to do that. So, and I've got members, many members that have been in that situation where they've had over 50 hearings, 10, 20 enforcement hearings, and the judge, I understand from the court's position. The courts are sometimes put in a difficult position. I understand that, but they're saying their hands are tied. They don't want to punish the other parent because it's not right for the child, but they're happy for the parent that's fighting to be in their child's life to continue to be punished, to continue to have to live without their child, to continue to have to, fall into depression, fall into potential debts, paying child support and court fees, because court fees, especially if you use representation, is not cheap. Then you have to pay child support, CMS, which is not reflective of the arrangement that you want. If it's 50-50, there shouldn't be any exchange of money. Both parents should be able to support their child themselves. There shouldn't be any exchange, unless it's voluntary. So if you're in a position where you're getting fleeced for money through the family court, you're paying money to support a child that should be with you, and you're not seeing that child, so that compounds, the psychological impact of that it compounds that, because you're lost. You're spending so much money, more than you can afford, and you're depressed because you cannot see the person or the children or child, the person that means the most to you in the world. So it's not, and you go to court, back to court 10, 20, 30 times, and nothing's done. You can see why some parents are forced to that point where they do take their own lives, because they're exhausting every option available to them, every avenue that is available to them they are using, and the door's being shut on them every time. And it's not just the courts, sorry to keep going, but it's not just the courts, because I've had parents go through this, and they'll go to the police. They'll say, the other parent is maliciously communicating. They are making false allegations to the court. They're making false allegations to the police. They're making false allegations to Children's Services, to CAFCAS. All of these have been found to be false several times in the court. You know, it's on record that the other parent has lied, and nothing's done. And the police will then go, no, this is a civil matter. Even though this person that's called the police, who's on the edge, who's got no other option, and it falls under harassment, it falls under malicious communication, it falls under coercive control. It is a criminal offence, what these parents are doing. That is criminal, but the police don't want anything to do with it. So what are these parents meant to do? If nobody is going to help them, if the system doesn't help them, if the police won't help them, if they have no money, they have no viable way of seeing their children, where do they go? And that's unfortunately where you see them take their own life.
Also, if there's all those court actions happening, the child is growing up in that time and you're missing those precious years.
Yeah, the length of the process, I think with the system the way that it is, I think when that application is made, the amount of time between the application being made and the other bodies getting involved, like CAFCAS, etc., the time that takes is far too long. You know, we're talking months and months before it's even heard in court, and then that's only normally a directions hearing, and then you have to then go back to court after other things are done, like the CAFCAS reports and such and such. So we're talking 6 months possibly or longer before any type of decision is made on contact. And meanwhile, the alienating parent has no reason to allow contact in that time. So obviously that's going to cause issues with the child. The child is going to feel a disconnect from their other parent because they're not spending any time with their other parent. So, and in that time, no one's supervising this parent that's just unjustifiably stopped contact. No one's saying, well, how are you behaving around this child? What are you telling this child? Because they're not going to tell the truth. If you're alienating your child, if you're being vicious and malicious and intentionally trying to destroy that relationship, you're not going to go to the child, look, it's because I want more money, or it's because I just want to get back at them because I'm mad at them for leaving me, or I'm mad at them for whatever reason. They're not going to say that to the child. They're going to say, oh, it's because they're this, it's because they're that, it's because they did this. They have to make up lies in order to justify it, because the truth doesn't justify it. So they have to lie. But nothing will be done. Nothing is done.
You mentioned the police. Obviously, if someone's blocking you from seeing your child, I guess that'll be the first port of call. Do you think police officers are kind of knowledgeable enough or trained enough in this issue to deal with it appropriately?
I think they're knowledgeable enough. I think it's so widespread. I can't go down the street most of the time when I've got the van, or, you know, admittedly I'm locally, obviously the van is everywhere locally, but I can't go many places without meeting somebody who's been through this, to some extent, or know somebody that's been through this. It's very rare that I meet anybody that has no first-hand knowledge of a child being stopped from seeing their parent. It's that common, but it became so normalised that people just accept it for what it is. They accept a dad will see the child less often, or, you know, that's quite widely accepted in society. Even though it shouldn't be, it is quite widely accepted, and I think that's why it's gone on this long. And this is, we're seeing the fallout. We're seeing the issues with mental health issues and everything that's happening now with the rises in crime. We're seeing the fallout of children not being able to see both parents and having that influence from both parents. But I think the police are knowledgeable. I just think they don't have any recourse. Like, when I've spoke to members who've spoken to the police, you know, off the record, they will understand. But when it comes to what powers they have and what they can do, they don't do anything. They can't do anything. It's almost like it's agreed upon within the police. I don't know, obviously, I don't have any inside knowledge, but it's almost like it's agreed upon in the police that they will not do anything because they don't want to, rather than they can't. They know that crimes are being committed, but it's almost as if they prioritise other issues, even though this issue is causing so many more issues, like crime statistics. They're massively linked to fatherless homes. There's studies made on this where children, I don't have the exact figures, but they're far more likely to turn to crime or turn to drugs, to make bad choices if they were brought up in a single parent household. So these are problems further down the line for the police, whereas they could actually interject, they could actually start enforcing the law on these alienating parents early to stop these becoming bigger and wider problems further down the line, but they don't. And I don't know why. So your guess is as good as mine on that, but they don't. They prioritise other issues.
So what about the children? I mean, what impact does this alienation have on them?
So the issue, that the impact it can have on a child is far-reaching. So some children turn out okay. The vast majority of children will grow up with some form of mental health issues if they've been alienated from a parent, if they've been subjected to that type of abuse. And parental alienation is abuse. It's psychological and emotional abuse. Often they'll have, as children, you'll often, from what I've seen, is a lot of behavioural issues. Children that have been going through parental alienation, where they're being stopped from seeing one of their parents, when they're being subjected to disparaging remarks about one of their parents, they often will exhibit behavioural issues because they internalise the feelings. They love that both parents. They're naturally going to love both parents. Children will love both parents, and then when they're being told and taught that one of their parents is bad, they're not going to speak up in behalf of the other parents. On behalf of the other parent, because they'd be too fearful of what backlash they would get from the alienating parent. So instead they internalise that, and that can have far-reaching issues growing up, as I say, behavioural issues, but a lot of, from my experience and what I've witnessed, even with my stepdad's children who are now adults, I've seen the damage that it's done to them. It can cause, sometimes alienated children will adopt the behaviours of the alienating parents. They might grow up to be compulsive liars. They might grow up with personality disorders as a result, because they will adopt those behaviours and they will see those behaviours to be normal. Or they can go the other way and they might have mental health issues, depression, might have a serious lack of identity because of not having that relationship with the other parent, and they might turn to drugs or addiction, or just generally be depressed. I have someone that works with us. He's started his own charity to do with this, and he was a former professional rugby player, and his son took his own life as a direct result of being alienated from his father. He wasn't able to deal with it. He wasn't able to deal with the separation from his father, and he wasn't able to deal with the malicious communications from his mother, and sadly he ended up taking his own life. And that's one example that I know close to home. I'm sure there's many others out there. I don't have knowledge of every situation, but I've seen the damage it does to children, to adults. I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, thinking back, say, in the 1950s, 1960s, I don't think there was much kind of this type of parental alienation happening. What are the aspects of society that have caused this to rise and become more popular?
So, obviously, I was born in the 90s, so I would say, though, it's the breakdown of the nuclear family. It's the fact that more families were together back then. Now it's very commonplace for households to be broken. I think it's over 50% of families are broken now. Whereas back then, I don't have the numbers, but I'm sure it's far, far less. Like, it seems to me like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, even probably the 80s, I don't know. But if you go back that far, I think it's pretty clear that more families stayed together back then. So there might have been some elements of alienation in the home, but it wasn't as severe as when parents are living separately, because it's much easier to impact that relationship when a child only gets to hear one side of the story. It's when you're in the same household, even if both parents are making disparaging remarks about each other, it becomes part of that family dynamic rather than a bigger issue. Alienation is minimised in that sense when parents aren't getting along but are in the same home. And then often, I think, because divorce was a less viable option back then.
Yeah, it's much easier now.
It's much easier now. It's much more profitable now. I think it's more encouraged now than it was. I think back then it was kind of frowned upon, I would imagine.
You see adverts on buses now talking about
Yeah,
an easier way to divorce.
we were behind not today, but another time we were behind a bus. Where is it? Chichester, I think it was. And on the back of the bus, it was like it said, "Are you looking for a change?" It was a family law firm, and it was like looking for a change, as if like just getting a divorce is like just changing a handbag, or you're looking to move house or something. It's like we're talking about destroying, severing a relationship here, a contract that you've signed. A marriage certificate or contract or whatever it is. We're just being so frivolous with something that's meant to be everlasting and serious. It's just not seen the same way anymore. And I think that's why back then families would stay together. You wouldn't hear as much about parental alienation and families separate because it didn't happen. Whereas now we've got the laws, a lot of the laws and a lot of the biases and systems in place that reflect that time period, when actually society and culture has shifted so much, and the law and the systems in place have not caught up with how society's shifted.
Do you think there is a sense that society has changed and the laws applying to this haven't changed? What changes would you like to see?
So I think the changes that I would like to see I think there are laws in place that can punish parental alienation and alienated behaviours. I think the laws already exist. Right. I think you've got coercive control. That is a criminal offence. I think parental alienation very often falls under that. And I think you've got non-accidental injury to a child. And parental alienation is the psychological and emotional injury to a child. So these laws do exist. I just think there needs to be more investigation done into these matters. I think the people that actually look into these matters need to be more qualified to actually identify it. Because to me, it's obvious. I've seen so many cases now that it's obvious. But obviously to people that aren't as experienced as I do, don't have the same optics that I do, will probably need more training. So I think there needs to be a lot more done to be able to identify these situations, because the law does already exist that makes this a crime. So I think it can be enforced if it's looked into. I think the family court system massively needs to be sped up. I think they need to find a way to speed this process up. I think if people are going to court knowing that they're going to get a hearing the next week, I think that massively reduces any impact on that child. That gives the alienating parent far less opportunity to alienate the other parent. I think it gives the parent that's been alienated a much better chance of re-establishing that contact ASAP. And I think when a parent makes false allegations which happens all the time, like I only have the people that come to me, but I would say in over 90% of the cases that I've seen, which is only a few thousand, but it's still a few thousand, I'd say over 90% of those cases, there are allegations that are either false or completely unsubstantiated, because there's no consequences. So I think because it's a civil court, I think what needs to happen is any allegations that are false, that are made in family court and found to be false, need to be punishable as if they were made in criminal court. Because I've had members that have been falsely accused of rape, been found to be false, but because it's in civil court, nothing's done about it. Whereas if that was in criminal court, the person that's made these allegations would possibly, or should, and usually would, you'd hope, be prosecuted for that. Yeah. But because it happens in family court, behind closed doors, very secret, nothing's done about it. So I think that needs to be changed. I think when allegations of that severity are made, punishments need to happen, because that should not be happening. Definitely not at the rate that it is happening, that I've seen it happening. And I think when court orders are broken, they need to be enforced. I think at the moment I see so many court orders broken and the judge just doesn't do anything about it. Now if I'm a judge and I'm seeing my orders, my word, what the orders that I've made be broken, where's that sense of pride in what you've done? Yeah. Why are you not enforcing something that you've said should happen, and you know that they are purposely breaking what you've said that they have to do, that both parents have to comply with? You know one parent is breaking that, and you're just going, oh well, and then go back again and back again and back again and just go, oh, what can I do, kind of thing. What are you like? That's not how it should be dealt with. It's like you are breaking a court order. It needs to be enforced. And I think if these things happen, then we will see a lot less parental alienation because the opportunities will go. And I think also the CMS, I think at the moment they just will chase parents for money even while court proceedings are going ahead. You've got two parents, one parent saying I don't want the other parent to see the child, the other parent saying I want 50-50 or whatever. And the CMS are chasing them for money based off of what the alienating parent is saying, not what the alienated parent wants. Now they shouldn't be getting involved at all until a final order is made. They shouldn't be involved at all. I think these things need to be changed so the alienated parent has a fighting chance to actually stick up for their child, because right now the system just wants to pile on to whoever's in that alienated capacity and basically the system's almost designed to just erase them because the money is to be made for the family law professionals and from the CMS. The government obviously make money from that. I think that there's so many incentives to drive a parent out of a child's life, and no one's actually realising, well, hold on, the damage this is doing to that parent, who could, and I've seen it happen so many times, will potentially take their own life because you've pushed them that far. And a child that's growing up with potentially so many different issues, if they even get to grow up, because I've known children that have grown into adults that have then taken their own lives, and so the system right now is failing so many children, so many parents, and I think there's not that many changes that need, the changes that need to happen are the obvious ones. They're so obvious, like it's for me to say enforcing a court order, that sounds obvious, but it doesn't happen. It very rarely happens.
For me, if I had a court order, I would feel terrified to break it. How do those parents know that they can do that? Do you think the lawyers are advising?
Yes. I know of solicitors that advise. I've known of them. I've been told, and I've seen documents where solicitors are advising their clients to, like, if they break a court order, nothing's going to happen. They advise them to make, not, they may not come out with the direct words, make false allegations, but they're almost, I've known parents, I've seen in documents, I've been privy to proceedings in some cases where it's almost as if like the parent is coerced to believe they've been abused in some ways because they know that conflict is where the profit lies. If a case is drawn out over months or years, especially, how much money will that solicitor or barrister or whoever's representing either side, how much money are they going to make from that conflict? They don't want to solve the problem early because where's the money to be made there? There's none, or very little. So the money lies in drawing this process out as long as possible.
I just wanted to also ask you about the family courts. I've had guests on this show, they're saying the family courts don't really function as they should and they're very weighted towards one parent rather than the other. And do you think they're fit for purpose and functioning properly?
No, I don't think they're fit for purpose. I think the whole system is deliberately combative. I think there is no focus on resolution in the family court. I think I don't think it's necessarily the family court's fault, but I think the parties to it, the solicitors, the barristers, etc., they are getting paid off of the conflict. So there is no interest for them to solve anything quickly. It's in their best interest to protract matters as much as possible. So I think that makes it difficult. I think, as I say, the lack of enforcement, the lack of punishment of court orders, I think is a massive issue. I mean, if I'm going in that as a solicitor knowing that my client is not going to get punished regardless, then I can advise them to do anything. It's not going to make any difference. So I think it isn't fit for purpose until it enforces its own orders and punishes parents that break the court orders, and until we have when agencies do get involved, such as CAFCAS, until we have the right intel as well, I don't think it's ever going to work. I don't think a judge is ever going to be able to look through a bundle of hundreds of pages and actually really understand what's going on. They're relying on CAFCAS knowing what they're talking about, and they often don't. But it's not necessarily the staff's fault, but I don't believe they're trained very well. Sometimes as humans, we all have biases. It's possible. If I'm a dad going into a court proceeding as a CAFCAS officer or a Kafkas officer, and I've had family members I know have been falsely accused, then I may have a bias that this could be the case here. So I think it's natural for human beings to have biases. I'm not saying it's good, but I think that's natural. So I think there can be a lack of objectivity there, because a lot of, obviously in my situation, I'd say around 90% or so of people that come to PAPA and join PAPA for help are dads. And I think you've got a lot of workers in Kafkas, etc., who are women. Now, I'm not here to say that that's because that they have any issue with men or anything like that. I just think naturally there's going to be a bias there, because they're more likely, their peer group are more likely to be women. They're more likely to understand a woman's perspective and will have different viewpoint than I would. So there's an issue there of objectivity, in my opinion. And then you have them. I don't believe they're trained well enough to identify alienating behaviours or parental alienation. I've seen some Kafkas reports that are brilliant, hit the nail on the head. They've understood what's going on, and I've seen others that have. I don't even know where they've got the report from. They've kind of just completely missed everything and got it completely the wrong way around. So I think there's an issue there. I think the judges, they don't have any time to be looking through everything. I think obviously with the introduction of AI, I think this could change in the future, because AI can scan a bundle in seconds, whereas a judge has not. They don't have the time to be reading through all of that. So a judge doesn't really have the full picture. They're relying on other people. They're relying on potentially the accounts of both parties, potentially their representation, and obviously any outside agencies. So they're in a difficult position to actually understand what's going on. So I don't always, they can often make the wrong decision and the wrong order. I don't understand where they get some of it from sometimes. I don't understand how it's not obviously just 50-50 and then we'll work from there. That should always be the default. If there's no genuine safeguarding concerns, if there's no evidence of safeguarding concerns, land at 50-50, equal parenting, and then negotiate from there. I don't know where they get some of these orders from and some of these contact arrangements, but even so, when they are broken, the accountability does then fall on the judges, because they're not enforcing their own orders and they're not punishing the parents for breaking their orders. So I think there's accountability everywhere. Maybe not immediately with the judge. You can maybe offer them some leeway when they don't have the full picture. But when they do have the full picture, and then they are still letting the other parent get away with breaking court orders, and they're starting to build the full picture and they still don't do anything, then they're very much accountable. And I think the fact that there's if a judge makes a bad decision, nothing happens. There's no motivation, or there's no incentive for a judge to get it right as such. I imagine there's some personal pride in doing their job, but when they get it wrong, there's no issue. Unless you appeal it, which most people don't appeal it, which we always say they should appeal it, they can just go on about their business without any repercussions. So right now we just have a system that's like, you look at aviation, like that is so highly regulated, whereas, and as it should be, because obviously many people's lives are at stake, but so's the family court. We're talking about children's lives, parents' lives, the wider family, because it's not just the parents as well that get alienated, it's the whole wider family. It's the grandparents and aunties, uncles, cousins, etc., siblings. So we're talking about many people's lives potentially being ruined by a bad court decision, a bad judgment, or a lack of enforcement, a lack of punishment, and not anywhere near enough is being done about that. There's no regulation, so that probably would be another thing that should happen, is more regulation around family court decisions, because right now there's no consistency. You can't make sense of it, really. When you look at, there's many cases that I've looked at, and you see some outcomes be fair and good, and many others be just ridiculous. You can't make sense of it, and the reason why you can't make sense of it is because it's not regulated, and it's because there's no repercussions for bad work that's been done, and there's no incentives to get it right, essentially.
And finally, I mean, if someone's watching this and they've been through some of the stuff we're talking about, what should they do?
I think what they should do is join Papa. We've worked really hard on building a lot of resources for people, and I think if you're going through it, I think another thing I would advocate for is going to therapy. When I was stopped seeing my son, and I was dealing with those issues, I did have I think around 6 months of therapy, cognitive behavioural therapy, and I think it's massively beneficial because it retrains your brain to start thinking positively, even though you're going through a very negative thing. I think it's important to try maintain a positive mindset, try reframe your mindset, because a lot of what you're going through, and it's obviously, I'm speaking very generalized here, but a lot of the time your situation isn't permanent, and there are things that can be done to change that. And obviously at Papa we are solution focused, so we try to offer as many solutions as possible. We try to offer offer courses, and we've got hundreds of articles, we've got massive support spaces, etc. We're trying to offer solutions, because when I was stopped from seeing my son, I went to other organisations for help, and unfortunately it wasn't what I thought it was. Like, everybody was just trying to take my money. And I just didn't sit right with me. I thought, well, why should anybody have to pay just to see their child? That shouldn't happen. I think I understand paying to support your child. I would support anything that my child ever needs, but paying just for the opportunity to see my child is ridiculous. As a loving parent, as a willing and able parent, it didn't make any sense to me. So I was like, well, no, I don't want to pay hundreds or thousands of pounds just for an opportunity to see my child. I thought, well, collectively, we could build something where everybody has the knowledge, everybody has something to offer, and I can learn from that, learn from other people's experiences, learn from other people's knowledge. And that's what Papa was built off of. It was built off of a community that everybody shares their own knowledge and experiences, and is able to then fight their own battles and feel empowered to fight their own battles without needing to pay solicitors or Mackenzie friends or people that are not in it for the right reasons a lot of the time. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. Whereas at Papa we are very much focused on the child and helping parents be there for their children. But I think in order to be there for your child, you need to do the work internally. I think this, when you're alienated, when you're going through this, it really does take a toll on you. So I think, if an alienated parent was watching this, other than obviously joining Papa, but if they were watching this, then I would say they would have to make steps to do the work on themselves, so that they are the best version of themselves for when they do reunite with their child, because it will and can happen. Often when we help people, it does happen relatively quickly. Sometimes parents sadly go a long time through the process, but I've seen so many times where children who've been alienated seek that parent. They want to know that side. They want to find the parent that they've been alienated from. And if you're the best version of yourself, if you've done that work on yourself, and you don't fall into that victim mindset, then you're always going to be in a better position to re-establish that connection, re-establish that relationship. So yeah, that's what I would recommend to do. So yeah, join Papa and do the work on yourself that's required, and just read up on everything. That's what I did when I was going through it. Obviously I had organisations saying, no, give us thousands of pounds, we'll do this, and I'm like, well, I can do it myself. All I need to do is read. All I need to do is learn. It's not hard to learn things. You just read. You just, it's not a hard thing to do. It's just, a lot of people don't want to do that, but we're talking about your child here. Like, you're talking about your life. Nobody is going to be able to do it better than you. So read those articles, read those books, watch those videos, watch those courses. Give yourself as much knowledge as possible to empower you as much as possible to take on the challenges ahead. That's what I did, and thankfully I've obviously have a very good relationship with my son, and have done for, well, Papa's been nearly a decade. old, and nearly all of that I've been back in my son's life. So it can be done. You just have to empower yourself.
Simon Cobb, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.